Welcome to the latest episode of the Catalyst Health and Wellness Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Cooper, and we specifically planned today's episode to coincide with the week of Thanksgiving, which in many ways is the unofficial start of the holiday season. Now, the holidays can bring with them a great amount of joy. There's extra time with family, friends, loved ones. However, what often isn't discussed is the pain that sits beneath the surface, the struggles we all have, and the fact that the holidays can actually increase the intensity of those struggles in the midst of everything else. Today's guest is Jerry Schemmel. Jerry is the play-by-play analyst for the Colorado Rockies Major League Baseball team. However, he is also the survivor of the 1989 crash of Flight 232, which resulted in the death of 112 people who were on that flight with him. Today, we'll touch on a few lighthearted sports-related questions out of the gate, but the focus will be on how we can help those around us, or maybe even garner some personal guidance when the plane crashes in life seem to take over. One of the things I haven't mentioned in quite some time is our continuing education courses that are available at catalystcoachinginstitute.com. As I was preparing this, I remembered one of our most popular courses is actually titled Coaching Someone Through a Crisis, which obviously overlaps significantly with today's discussion. But we have a huge library of options, so there are no prerequisites. Feel free to poke around under the Education tab on the website. And of course, always feel free to reach out to us with anything coaching related. Results at catalystcoachinginstitute.com. Thanks for joining us. Now let's listen in on the conversation with Jerry Schemmel on this episode of the Catalyst Health and Wellness Coaching Podcast. Jerry Schemmel, it is such a pleasure to have you join us today, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Coop. It's good to be with you, my man.
Absolutely. Your background, the audience knows a little bit about you from the introduction if they didn't already know you, but could you give us some of the highlights of how you went from, and this always makes me laugh, from law school to one of, frankly, the most coveted careers in the world as a Major League Baseball play-by-play analyst?
You know what? I wonder that myself sometimes, to be honest with you. And I chuckle sometimes, like, how did this happen? You know what? I think what it really got down to was this. I came out of college with a degree in broadcast journalism. I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. I really did from day one, probably as an 18 or 19-year-old. And that's really when I got out of school and could not find a job. And I could have done a sports anchor at a small market or something and you know, read sports in front of the camera and probably got a job that way and done okay. But I wanted to do games, and I just couldn't find a job coming out of college. So plan B for me was go to law school. So my brother was an attorney, and I got into the law school that I wanted to get into, and at my undergrad, Washburn University has a law school. And so I thought, all right, I'll just go to law school since that's other things not going to work out. And then during law school, my first year, I got a part-time job doing broadcasting, started doing high school games on the radio. And so that just sort of opened that back up again. And I did both for a long time. I graduated law school, practiced law for 4 or 5 years on my own while I was doing freelance broadcasting. And then once I got into the NBA, which is 1991, with Minnesota, 1990, then I gave up the law practice full time. So that's kind of the way it worked. I know it's a little bit different route than a lot of broadcasters take, but it worked out okay for me.
Nice, very nice. Well, our focus today, as you know, is going to be how we can most effectively support clients, friends, family members who've survived figurative plane crashes in their own life. But before we get too serious, let's do some sports stuff here. You spent about 18 years as an announcer in the NBA before moving on to Major League Baseball. What were some of the things that you remember that might surprise our listeners about the whole NBA culture and some of the things you experienced there?
Yeah. First of all, I loved it and I miss it a lot. I've been away from it for 10 years now, the NBA, and I think I'd miss it this much, Brad, to be honest with you. But I really miss the game excitement, the energy, the enthusiasm, the emotion that goes into every NBA game. Because baseball is so different, as you know. It's slow-paced, and there's not a great physical exertion going on all the time, and it's fun, and it's a great game. But I kind of miss that electricity of an NBA game. So I think when I tell people that, it's like, oh, okay, well, that makes more sense. I really didn't think about it that way. But I miss as well the action of guys that are 6'8" and great athletes flying up and down a court. I'm still just amazed at how big these guys can be, and they can still have agility and speed and quickness like they do. I mean, just don't see that much in baseball. So that's the stuff that I remember a lot, is these incredible athletes that play the game of basketball at that high level. I do miss as well the close game where your team makes a last second shot and you nail the call. I mean, those are fun times for me that you don't get in baseball. You get your walk-off home run or hit once in a while in baseball, but in basketball, you've got that chance to call the game winner at the end is just exhilarating, and it's something that I loved and I miss these days.
Interesting. Very interesting. How about the culture of the players? And obviously things change quickly in our culture. So what's happening now might be very different than it was 10, 12 years ago. But any surprises in terms of what you experienced there, what you saw there happening with the teams, the interaction with the coaches, the players, all those kinds of things?
Well, I could tell you the culture in the NBA is way different from Major League Baseball, at least with the Rockies, the team I call games for. It's really a bunch of, I think you and I have had this conversation, it's a bunch of guys that are just normal people that happen to be good at baseball. And a lot of things in common. And it's the nature of the game. It's played by a bunch of suburban kids for the most part. And then you got your Latin guys that come over. In basketball, 9 out of 10 guys are from the inner city. 9 out of 10 are black. There's just 8 out of 10 are from broken families. It's just a completely different background of players. Not that it's bad or that it's better than baseball. It's just a lot different.
Right.
And in basketball, these guys come into the league with a rookie contract and they're instant millionaires. Where in baseball, you got to play in the minors for probably at least 3 or 4 years, work your way up, don't make much money. And then hopefully after 6 years, 3 years as a rookie contract, and then 3 years arbitration, you can sign a contract and make some money. So that basketball is different that way. There's that instant gratification monetarily with players that you don't get in baseball that really makes it different.
That's a great point. I didn't think about that. All right. So give us one funny story from each, one that you remember from NBA, one Major League Baseball. Probably keep it as a non-current player just to not put you on the spot at all, but just some fun little story from each that folks might go, never heard that before.
Yeah, in basketball, in the NBA with the Nuggets, I did a game where the Nuggets played the Utah Jazz, and John Stockton was the point guard for the Jazz, Hall of Famer, has a NBA record for most assists. I think the greatest point guard that ever played. But the Nuggets had a guy named Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, Chris Jackson, and he was lighting up the Jazz in Utah, in Salt Lake City. And Stockton, of course, was matched up against him and just couldn't stop. He ended up with 53 points, I think, in the game. And at one point, late in the fourth quarter, Mahmoud hit like 3 or 4 jumpers over him, and he took this jumper, and John Stockton just took his forearm and knocked him to the floor in disgust. He was so frustrated because he couldn't stop this guy from scoring. He just knocked him down. And Mahmoud just gets right back up and jumps over the free throw line. It's like, this is great. This guy's a future Hall of Famer. I just saw him deck our guy, and our guy stands up and gets ready to make his 53rd, point of the night. So that's the one. They're big games and big plays and shots that finish games that were great, and the playoff run a couple times. But that's the one that sticks out for me. It was just a kind of a funny moment involving who I think is the greatest point guard in the history of the game. With the Rockies, I was fortunate to call Carlos Gonzalez's walk-off home run to hit for the cycle at the same time. 4 or 5 years ago, he had a single, double, triple, and it was in the ninth inning. It was 7-7, I think, and he hit a home run as a walk-off to win the game and for the cycle. So Nolan Arenado actually had the same thing, but I didn't have his call. But it was, I think, in the 10th inning, so I had that call. And that in baseball is probably my most memorable moment.
Wow. I could see that. Great stuff. All right. Time to go deeper. In 1989, you're about 29 years old. You're on flight 232 when the engine blows up. You're 37,000 feet in the air. Plane crashes in Sioux City, South Dakota. 296 people on board and 111 don't get to go home. You survive physically, but obviously it was a very long journey back psychologically. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I sure can. Look back on it now. This is going to sound kind of crazy when I say it, but hopefully it'll make sense. But I look back at the crash, Brad, and I've known this for a long time, for a decade now, and see the time before we hit, knowing we're going to hit, the crash itself, the aftermath, all the craziness that happened in Sioux City. I look back and see the easy part. The harder part for me was dealing with all the emotional fallout that came from that crash. And I had never heard the term post-trauma stress disorder. We hear it all the time now with our military personnel, but I was diagnosed with that, and I had no idea what it even meant, what those words meant, let alone what it meant for my life. And I went on a kind of a downward spiral for several months after that crash that I really couldn't figure out. I quit my job. I didn't want to work. Obviously, I was in depression. My marriage was falling apart. I got 6 brothers and sisters, and my parents were alive then, and very close family. Wouldn't even return their telephone calls. And I was suffering from PTSD, and I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know where it came from. I figured it's from the plane crash, but I didn't know that. And that was just for about 10 months, almost a year after the crash. That was a very, very difficult part of my life. And I was thinking just the other day, anticipating us talking about it, that I can't believe that my wife and I have been married 34 years now. I know you just celebrated your anniversary, but yeah, we were married 4 years at the time of the crash. And if you would have told me at that time that our marriage would last, I would have said absolutely not. We were so close to breaking up. Wow. And we worked through that, and now we're here for another 30 years after it.
Wow. One of the things we want to try to peel out of this for the folks listening is they're interacting with folks, maybe clients, maybe coworkers, family members that are going through some tough stuff. So any feedback, and obviously you're different than the next person, but just from your perspective, were there things that those around you did, said, modeled, anything that had a positive impact through that tough? You said it was about 10 months that was the deepest part?
Yeah. There are some things that people said that really that were tough that I just sort of shook my head at. I mean, people would say, you survived that plane crash, so you could do something big. You're going to be president of the United States. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And like, I don't know about that. I'm just happy to be alive here. And it's all well-intentioned. It really is. And other people said, well, someday you'll figure out, why God allowed you in that plane crash, and you'll have the answer. And it's been 30 years. I don't have any. I have some of the answers. I don't have all of them. I wish it wouldn't have happened. Still. And there was one thing, Brad, to answer your question, I guess, that my brother said to me. I've got 4 brothers, and the youngest is Joel. He said to me after the plane crash, I remember this like it happened yesterday. We're on the phone, and he's asked me a few questions about the event, and he's a pretty quiet guy anyway. And he said, hey, there was silence on the phone for about 10 seconds. He says, you know what, Jerry, I have no idea what to say to you right now. But all I can tell you is this: I'm here for you. And if you need anything at all, you've got to call me. That's probably the best thing anybody could ever say to me. They weren't trying to explain away what happened. They weren't trying to tell me it was going to be okay. And sometimes it's not going to be okay. Right. But for someone to tell, you know what, I don't have any words for you, but man, I love you. And if you need anything from me, you better not hesitate and call, or I'll be disappointed. I think that's probably the best thing you can say to somebody in a circumstance like that. I'm with you. I'm here. And if you need something, chances are you're probably not going to get a call from that person saying, hey, I need this or I need that. But to know that that person is available meant the world to me.
Yeah, that's powerful. In terms of frequency, was it, did he then just stop? Did he just, okay, he said that, he let it go, and then he circled back 4 months later, or maybe you reached out to him, or did he then check in a week later, 2 weeks later? Hey, buddy, bro, how you doing? That kind of stuff. Well, and again, the answer for you is different than somebody else, but just curious for you specifically, how did that play itself out?
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. I think he probably, knowing Joel, he probably put in his calendar, said, I'm gonna call Jerry once a week, because he's a much more organized guy than I am. Very, very successful real estate developer these days. But I think he probably made a point to call me once a week, and I would say probably for the first year after that. And It was the same conversation. It was short. It was, how you doing? Let me know what I can do for you. He lived in Florida. We want to come down and get away. You come stay with whatever that looked like at the time. And then after a year or so, he stopped doing it as often as he did, which is good. That was healthy. I didn't need to have that all the time. But yeah, he was very, very considerate that way. And, I look at that sort of pattern today, Brad, and I think it'd be easier. I think sending somebody a text once a week would be incredibly meaningful for somebody that went through something like I did. Hey, how you doing? What can I do for you? Type of text. Takes 10 seconds to do it, and it means the world to people.
But really avoiding here's the wisdom of the day and just literally saying,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm just here.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And again, when I say people, they say these other things, they want to help. They come from the right intention, the right motivation. They want to help you out, but sometimes those words don't do that. And trying to explain things away, or it happened for this reason, or you'll find that out, or you're going to do something really big now. And I think that puts more pressure on people than it does take pressure off. So yeah, just being there for people and letting people know that you're there for them, I think is really important.
How about the folks that were proximity wise right there with you? So your wife, Diane, or other family members, friends that live next door, or you're seeing at work. How about those folks? Because that was different. Your brother was far away. He would check in, once a week. But how about the folks you were seeing every single day? Were there things that, and you don't need to attach names to it, but were there things that were very helpful and other things not so much?
Yeah, I think there were. I know some helpful things were. I worked in a continent at the time of the crash, the Colorado Basketball Association, and the commissioner of the league died in the crash that I was in. And we had this woman who was a receptionist for our office. It was a small operation. We had 8 people, but she was kind of the receptionist. And when I'd come to work after the crash, she wouldn't even say it. Just go hug me. I walk in the door. She would hug me. She'd go back to her seat and sit down and start working again. I walk away. We never said anything to each other, but she that that nonverbal communication, like, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad you're here. I love you. And I'm sitting right here if you need me type of look on her face and feel to that hug. So those simple things like that, I think, meant a lot. I think my wife, to be honest, was the one that was obviously as close to me than anybody, struggled to try to figure that out. What do I do with this guy? He's half crazy. He's going through post-trauma stress disorder. He survived this plane crash. He can't sleep. He doesn't want to talk to me. So I think she really struggled trying to figure things out, and that ended up being silence, basically, because she didn't know what to say. So I think when that happens, you get in some trouble. And now these days the roles are kind of reversed. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had surgery, a double mastectomy, and I've kind of taken care of her now. And so I think about the back of the days, the plane crash, Coop, when the role was reversed. Now it's like, hey, honey, what can I get for you? What can I do for you? I don't know what to do. I can do the dishes because I know you can't, and I can drive you to this appointment because I know you can't, but what else can I do to help you? And sometimes there isn't an answer. The answer is nothing. But the fact that you're asking the question, I think, means a lot.
That's great advice. All right, let's take it one level deeper now. So we've said the people that are far away, the people that are right there, and now for you, were there, and again, disclaimer for everybody listening, what worked for Jerry is different for everybody, but were there steps that you took personally? We'll talk about your faith here in a minute, but were there other things that you did personally that you think retrospectively helped get you through that as well?
Yeah. There was a couple things. Number one was I finally came to the realization that people were just trying to help, so you can't ignore them, and you can't just blow them off. And I think I took an attitude of thankfulness at that point. You know what, these people are, because I didn't respond to anybody for months at a time. I literally was in my little cocoon, my little shell. And I finally realized these people are reaching out to you to help you. So let's at least acknowledge that. So the fact that I finally came to the conclusion that these people are doing this because they care. So let's appreciate that. That was one for me. Secondly, and it's a little bit different, was I thought it was important to do something physically again. And what I did is I got back on my bicycle. I really did. And I'd done triathlons and just sort of as an amateur and did them for fun and to stay in shape. And I always loved the cycling aspect of it. And I thought, you know what, let's do something to replace what's been taken away from you and all this emotional trauma. And that was do some kind of physical exercise. And it was for me getting back on a bicycle. It really was great therapy for me to do something. And that therapy is, and that answer is not a bicycle itself, but it's,
Right.
go work out or go walk or, do something physically to occupy your body and your mind. It made a huge difference for me.
I love it. You see that thread in a lot of the recommendations that are out there. So it's interesting to hear you say that directly. Anything else along those lines? Was there like sleep, for example? Sleep had to be so difficult to get your arms around because every time you closed your eyes, you were back there. Any things you discovered through that process?
Not really. I still have nightmares about the crash.
Sure.
I probably once or twice a month I have that crazy dream again. But yeah, sleep was a real difficult thing. It eluded me for a long time. But as time passed away from that plane crash, the sleep started to come back a little bit. There is one thing that's really interesting to me is some advice my dad gave me. And my dad was a very quiet guy. Didn't say much at all, but when he did speak, he had some wisdom. And he's a World War II vet and never talked about that. And anyway, he said one day, and I think this is probably 6 or 7 months after the crash, and he said to me, "Jerry, just keep moving." And I thought, okay, let me think about that. And that's all he said. And to me, that was, you know what? You don't need to sit on the couch and watch TV. Why don't you get up and do something? And you don't need to walk self-pity. Just kind of keep yourself moving and occupied, and eventually things will kind of work themselves out. Will it be great? Will it be the way it was before the crash? No, of course that's not going to happen. But you know what? Just keep moving and things will take care of themselves. And man, that guy was right. He was always right about that stuff, but he was especially right about keeping moving.
Nice. That's I love that. All right. So your faith played a significant role for you through all of this. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that. And then as part of that, talk to us a little bit about why then. You were about 29 at the time. Why not 5 years prior, 10 years prior? What happened?
I can answer that in one word, Brad. It was ego. Honestly, I was a broadcaster and thought I was a hot shot. Thought I was going to be the next Bossis or Al Michaels or somebody, and that occupied my life, and that was the priority. That was number one, and I had no spiritual foundation whatsoever. I went to mass at a Catholic church growing up once in a while, not every Sunday, when my parents would make me go. And so I never had any spiritual foundation whatsoever before the plane crash. So for me, it was always, whatever comes along, I can fix it. It's about me. It's not some high power. And I think that after the plane crash, I got to the point where I couldn't do this stuff on my own anymore. All the things I'd normally done to work myself out of any kind of funk I was in, smaller plane crash and moving on up, I could do it. I worked my way through college and law school. My parents never gave me a penny for any of it. And that's it. I tell that people are like, no way. I never got a dime from my parents. And I worked my way through and borrowed money and was an athlete and I just could do everything on my own. And then after that plane crash, it got to the point where I just couldn't do this by myself anymore. I was crippled and I was knocked down and I could not pick myself back up. And that's really when it turned for me. It was I remember sitting in a chair in our little apartment we had in Denver 10 months after the crash, and Diane was working. Thank God as I was unemployed, wallowing in self-pity and depression at home, and just sat down in a chair and realized that for the first time in 30 years, 29 at the time of the crash, now 30, that I'd been knocked down and I could not pick myself back up. And it was this simple. I said a simple prayer. I just said, God, would you please come into my life? And the prayer was not to save my marriage, which is falling apart, or to get a new job or come out of depression. It was, God, just give me something to hold on to here because I cannot do this by myself anymore. And when I said that prayer, and some people, some of your listeners here might think it's corny, but man, I swear to you, it happened this way. When I said that, something came over me. It wasn't an audible voice and it wasn't a physical sensation, but it was this overwhelming feeling of contentment and peace that kind of hit me that said, because of what I had done, and more importantly, the ally I just invited in my life, that eventually, not that moment or the next day or the next week, but eventually I knew I was going to win every single battle. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it wouldn't be quick. but I knew that I was going to win because I had the right ally fighting that fight for me. And that was step one in my faith journey. That was, I can pinpoint the day and the moment.
Wow. Wow. And then that helped create some additional momentum going forward, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely. And after that prayer and some more of it, I got to the point where I stopped asking this question all the time. And that was, why this plane crash? Why was I on board? Why did I survive? Why this little boy sitting right in front of me? He's 18 months old, perfectly healthy and happy in one moment. Next moment, we hit the ground, he's dead. I mean, why this little boy in front of him? Why Jay, my boss, 7 rows behind? Why 112 people that died in the crash? Why? Every single day. And after I said that prayer and that sort of peace and contentment came over me, I stopped asking that question so often because I knew it would never make sense. It would never make sense this side of heaven. And I remember this too distinct. I was just like, oh man, that's you're never going to get the answer to that question. So once that happened, I stopped asking the question so often and didn't drive myself crazy trying to find the answer.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Man, thanks so much for talking us through this. This is fantastic. Everybody responds differently to personal tragedy, but if you, at age 60, were to go back and sit down with a 30-year-old Jerry Schemmel in the midst of the darkest moments, what would you tell him?
I think a couple things. Number one, unlike what a lot of people say, it's not going to be okay. It's never going to go away. That plane crash is a scar. It's a wound. I shouldn't say a scar, a wound that will never completely heal, but that's okay. I think it was meant to be that way. I think it's part of my life now. So I think my first piece of advice is, you know what, it's going to be hard, but it's never going to go away. You just have to deal with it. It's going to be a part of your life and a big part of your life moving forward. I think the second thing would be, everybody else, Jerry, has a plane crash too. Brad Cooper has one. I don't know what it is, but our listeners have one. Every adult that we're ever going to meet has their own plane crash, whether it's as bad as what I went through, it might be worse than I went through, but everybody has their own plane crash. So you're not alone in this thing. This is called life. Life's all about plane crashes. And I think that would be my second piece of advice. Number one is, you know what? You're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to step up and be a big boy. And secondly, everybody else is going through the same thing.
Powerful. All right, just a couple summary wrap-ups here. Many of our listeners, obviously, are health and wellness coaches, and they're not counselors. They're not trying to be counselors. They know there's a difference here between coaching and counseling, but they're coming alongside folks who may have gone through something like this. You've given a lot of advice already. Any other advice that you might give to them knowing that role that they're in?
Yeah, I think if you're in that kind of role and you're trying to come alongside somebody, I think it's good to let them know that. You know, whether that's a quick text, once a week, or it's that hug I described earlier. But, it's one thing to say something to people like, hey, you know what, I'm here for you, but never follow up on it. Or say, you know what, I'm going to pray for you and never pray for that person. I think that's awfully counterproductive. So I think, one, be available for somebody, and two, follow up with that. Let that person know that you're not just talking, that you're about action and not about words. I think that makes all the difference. When somebody hears that you care about them, that's one thing. When somebody sees that you care about them, that's a whole nother world.
Good stuff. All right, my friend, any final words of wisdom you want to share?
Only that the Rockies are going to bounce back and have a great 2020.
They're going to follow the Nuggets pattern here, huh?
Yes, there we go. No, I don't think so, but I think we covered everything, but I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you, my friend. Pretty powerful stuff, wasn't it? Thank you so much to Jerry Schemmel for his willingness to be so transparent. Folks, I've gotten a chance to know this guy pretty well over the years, and he doesn't mess with some artificial public persona. He's the real deal. If you'd like to follow him on Twitter, you can do so at J Schemmel. It's JSCHEMMEL and then the number 6. So at J Schemmel 6. You can catch me at Catalyst, the number 2, Thrive as well if you'd like. The next Fast Track certification will be upon us before you know it. February 8th and 9th in Colorado. The Denver area where the course takes place is usually beautiful in February. However, if you're a skier or if you've been wanting to come to Colorado to ski, the mountains typically have great snow in February. So if you want to plan a couple extra days around the certification to enjoy it, might be good timing. Details about that, as well as the distance learning option, are available at catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or, as I always mention, reach out to us anytime. Results at catalystcoachinginstitute.com. In the meantime, let's go get better, and let's help those around us do the same. Jerry was kind enough to give us a closer look behind the curtain today. Sometimes better has nothing to do with a motivational speech. Sometimes it just means showing we care, that we're there in simple, heartfelt ways. Thanks again for joining us. This is Dr. Bradford Cooper signing off. Make it a great rest of your day, and I'll speak with you soon on the next episode of the Catalyst Health and Wellness Coaching Podcast.